Okay. And was anybody here tonight, not here last month, and also didn't hear the recording? Okay, that's fine. That's good. Welcome. For those of you who were here last night and or listened to the recording while we're waiting just 2 more minutes, any questions from last week? I mean month. Wow.
I wasn't going to correct.
Time is relative. Time is so relative. I've actually been doing that all day. Very bad concept of time. Yeah, so there it is. So no questions. That's either good or bad. So.
You explain things very well.
Thank you. Okay. So tonight we're going to speak about another branch of philosophy in the Vedic tradition. So I think to begin, just a moment, we already did our mantra in our asana class, and the people that were practicing here set the tone for everybody, and that was very nice. So we'll just go ahead and, however we are, just close the eyes and just have a couple of breaths. Just have a few breaths to kind of come into the space. Come into that beautiful concentration that we've built for ourselves. And bringing a smile to the face. And gently letting the eyes come open. And if it gets very warm, we'll open the door. Otherwise, we'll close it just in case people are prone to bug bites or any types of critters. And again, Mary, you in the back, if it gets cold back there, just turn off the air conditioner. Okay? Okay. So I want to touch down on something. Last week we spoke about last month we spoke about the 4 paths of yoga. So in the Vedic tradition, there are 6 orthodox philosophical schools of thought. Okay, they all boil down and they're like very, very old. And one of them is yoga, what we talked about last month. And it's yoga in the sense of the 4 paths that we discussed last month. That is one of these orthodox schools of thought. There are 5 other. And I think the direction of this class is going to be exploring all of those. Because it came to me that this next class we were going to talk about Vedanta, which is another of the 6. Okay? And then all this other stuff started coming to me, so it's happening. We're going to do it. Okay? So Vedanta is usually what people are talking about when they talk about yoga philosophy, when they talk about philosophy coming from India. Almost all of them are talking about Vedanta. It influences most of the popular world leaders in the, quote, Hindu world. Vedanta is not directly correlated with the religion Hinduism, but most of what is Hinduism has taken its principles from Vedanta. Okay? And this actually was not even a religion for a very long time. It just recently has become a religion to have the same rights and freedoms as other people. So Vedanta itself has several different subcategories. When people speak about Vedanta, they are usually talking about Advaita Vedanta, and that's what we're going to talk about tonight. Okay? And in the Western mind, we would translate Advaita Vedanta to the philosophy of non-duality. Okay? The philosophy of non-duality. And we're going to talk about several different philosophical systems, and they all have their merit, and some of them have discrepancies, and we're going to just absorb the information in a good way. Okay? Something that came through to me when I was thinking about this today was one of my other teachers, who is not in the Vedic tradition, he's in the Lakota tradition. He started saying this thing recently when we were receiving information from him, where he would say, people keep going to Vaughn's for construction supplies. Vaughn's doesn't have construction supplies. You know who I'm talking about. Vaughn's doesn't have construction supplies. Stop going to Vaughn's for construction supplies. And what he's meaning when he says this is, we keep going to the mind for what only the heart can understand. And this is very true when we're talking about yoga philosophy. It's extraordinarily true. Because when you start going down the wormholes of Vedanta, your brain is immediately going to start grabbing onto things. Well, this must mean this, and this must mean this. And we start to conceptualize it. When really it's something that we can only just experience. And so, even though we're going to receive a bunch of information tonight, I'm saying this at the beginning so we can gently guide ourselves back to not get attached to any one part. So there might be certain things that are said that click with you and you're like, oh wow, that makes a lot of sense to me. And then other things that don't, and just being open and hearing all of it and letting it come through however it does. I will also share this. I went and studied this at the source in the spring of 2016. And when I came back to the States, my teacher said, okay, now teach people. Because he gave me a scholarship. He's like, okay, now go teach people. It took me 2 years to digest all of it, to come to the place where I was like, oh, okay. And then I decided to share it with you guys. So be aware of that these things, it takes time to digest. Okay? You don't have to understand it all tonight. Okay? So having said that, Vedanta is a very large system of philosophy, and it can take you in many different directions, and it covers basically everything about existence. But it can be boiled down to 3 basic statements. Okay? And this philosophical system is actually about supposedly 6,000 years old, maybe more because oral traditions went on before it was ever written down. But at the end of 700 CE, a man named Shankar was born, and we call him Adi Shankaracharya. Acharya means teacher. Okay, but his name is Shankar. And he studied Vedanta very deeply, and at this time in the world, there was a lot of separation among people in India, among this is the right philosophy, this is the right philosophy, this is the way to pray, this is the way to pray, and people were kind of fighting with each other. Obviously, at that time, the whole planet was fighting with each other. Okay? And so he studied Vedanta very deeply, and he wanted to unify all of these things, all these ideas, and say, hey, you're all right. You're all basically saying the same thing. Let's maybe stop killing each other, was kind of his thought process. Okay? So he boiled it down into 3 statements. Because it's such a large philosophy, it's very daunting, and it's overwhelming. Well, I'm never going to understand that. I'm not a scholar. There are many great teachers in India that are illiterate. It is important to know this. You don't have to, it's great. It's great to read books. It cuts out a lot of work for yourself. But you don't have to be a genius to have a genius moment or to have this deep experience with yourself or understand something profound about yourself. Okay, it's very important to know that. So he boiled it down into 3 statements. He said, Brahma Satyam. Jagat Mitya Jivo Brahmaiva Na Para. It's 8 words. He broke down this beautiful philosophical system into 8 words. And we're going to spend the rest of the night talking about these 8 words. Brahma Satyam. This is the first statement. Brahma, in this context, is meaning the all-prevailing consciousness. That which is. I am that I am. That which is. Okay? Sometimes in the West, it's very easily translated directly to God. Brahma, God, all-prevailing consciousness. It's good to understand how it translates because here in the West, God could mean something completely different. Consciousness could mean something completely different. That which is relative to each of us. But for this statement, Brahma, the all-prevailing consciousness, this God consciousness. Satyam. Satyam is meaning truth. Truth. And in this direct statement is meaning what is real, what is actual. So he's saying here, Brahma Satyam directly translates to God is real. We deeper translate it to the all-prevailing consciousness is truth. This is truth, according to Vedanta philosophy. And he says, sorry, excuse me, give me one moment. For someone in my 20s, I'm not very technologically advanced. And he says, Jagat Mithya. Jagat means this universe, this dimension that we are seeing. Everything here. Mithya means illusion. It appears to be real, but it is not. It seems like it's what is real, but it is not. It's actually what we call, deeper in the philosophical system, all the philosophical systems, we call this Maya, which translates to the great play. It appears to be real, but it is not. The illusion is so deep that we cannot tell the difference. It's like we're in the simulation. It's very real. And how this correlates to Brahma, we have Brahma and Maya. Brahma is the blank screen, the white screen at the movie theater, okay? It's a blank screen. It's always white. It's always there. It never changes. Maya is the projection of the movie onto the screen. It wasn't there before. It won't be there after. It is constantly changing. But when it's on the screen, we think it's real. All the action, all the drama, all the romance, we think it's real. We think that's what the screen is. But actually, it's just a projection onto the screen. The screen has always just been what it is. This is Brahman, what is constant and never has a beginning, never has an end, and never changes, according to Vedanta. Maya is the illusion, what appears to be real but actually is not. Okay? So he's saying, Brahma Satyam, the all-prevailing consciousness is truth. God is real. Jagat Mithya, this universe appears to be real, but it is only an illusion. It's not real. And then he says, Jivo Brahmaiva na para. Jivo, Jiva, is the aspect of Brahma that is experienced inside of you. For instance, Muhammad Majaluddin Rumi says, you are not a drop in the ocean. You are the entire ocean in a drop. It's that same concept. That is the concept of Jiva. There are two aspects here. We have Brahman, this all-prevailing consciousness, and then we have what's called Jiva, and we have Atma. Jiva and Atma are the soul. The only difference is Atman is the soul who is aware that he is Brahman. He's aware that he is not separate. He's aware that he is everything. Okay? And I say he instead of he or she because that's how we used to write things. It doesn't matter. Okay? And Jiva is the aspect of Brahman living inside of the individual who is inert to the fact that he is God. He's unaware. He doesn't understand. He doesn't think that he's connected to everything. The illusion is so deep to him that he believes he is separate and alone. Okay? So this is the individual. Jiva, the sleeping individual. Atman, the soul is awake. Okay? And then Jivo Brahmaiva na para. Brahmaiva is, again, we're talking about Brahma. Na para. No difference. So he's saying here, the individual is none other than the all-prevailing consciousness. How these statements directly translate in the West most usually is Brahma Satyam, God is truth, God is real. Jagat Mithya, the world is an illusion, it appears to be real, but actually it is false. Jivo Brahmaiva na para, the individual is no other than God. Those are the three statements of Advaita Vedanta. And at the time, this was a very controversial thing to say. Even now, it's a controversial thing to say, claiming to be God, claiming that there's no separation between you and God, claiming that you are just experiencing this from this perspective. And we're all working together to experience existence from every possible perspective. But according to Vedanta, that's exactly what human existence is about. And becoming aware of the fact that you are Atman, waking up. You are Brahman. At the time, people were very deep into ritual. People still are. It's a great thing. And it was believed that we were dirty and impure, and there were many things that we had to do to become good enough to be loved by whoever our God was. Whatever this, and at the time, maybe that helped us and served us. But when Adi Shankaracharya was making these statements, it was with the intention of us being able to come into that awakening and being aware that there's nothing you have, according to Vedanta, there's nothing you have to do to become like God. You already are that. You are that. It's inside of you. It's what you are. Everything around you is an illusion. You're not separate from this great being. You are this great being, and you can feel it, and it's there for you. At the time, people had become very fundamental around the concept of what here in the West we call sin. In the East, sin has a different meaning. They say sin is anything that puts you farther away from your true self. So it's not as black and white. It's not, this is definitively right, this is definitively wrong. It's relative. Does this thing put you farther away from knowing your true self? Then that's a sin against yourself. If it brings you closer to understanding yourself, then this is the path you want to be on, according to Vedanta philosophy. Now, Adi Shankaracharya also defined several other important things. At the time, Buddhism was coming up in India, and it was becoming prevalent, and people were having discrepancies between, is Buddhism just the modern Hinduism? Is this just the next step of Hinduism? Was Buddha the next incarnation of Lord Narayana? Is this the same thing? And the fundamental separation that Shankaracharya defined was that in Vedanta, in the Vedic and Hindu traditions, and Hinduism didn't even exist back then. It was like Vedic Shastra. It didn't even have that name. And the difference is they believed in Atman, this experience of the soul. Everything that is Brahman being inside of each person. And in Buddhism, there is no self, there is no soul. That was the fundamental difference between the two. Now, it's interesting because you might be thinking, hopefully, why would the man that dedicated his life to talking about non-duality go so far out of his way to define differences between something? Why does it matter if there's a soul or not? Why does all of this stuff matter? The reason that he did this is exactly why he developed several different systems of understanding Vedanta, because the mind is always going to need to be satiated. It's very powerful. It's such a strong tool that if we don't satiate it, we start to go crazy. We'll start to go mad. We've all probably experienced it to some extent. And he developed in this book called the Vivekachudmani, a system called Neti Neti, which means not this, not that. And it's a process of elimination to come to know what you are. Because it is so difficult. I could say, everyone come to philosophy class tonight. And I'm going to tell you that God is real and this world is an illusion. And actually, you're God, you're God, you're God. And then bam, we'd all be in the fifth dimension, right? Except we have the mind. And the mind wants to be like, well, but why? That doesn't make any sense to me. Well, if I'm, okay, so what does that mean? How do I know that I'm me and not her? How come she's separate than me? And the mind starts getting all caught up on itself because it's there to keep us alive. It's there to help us survive. It's there to protect us. Okay, that's what the ego keeps us alive. Okay, we just have to be in control of it to some extent. So this system of Neti Neti, to come to understand Vedanta philosophy, begins with first an analytical process of what you are not. And it's very similar to the way that we practice asana. For instance, we spoke last month about how we're practicing asana and we're learning all the different postures and we're very focused on moving the body around, and then we learn the postures. And so now we're focused on the breath. And we're relaxing into the postures and we come into our breathing and the mind starts to calm and we have this like moment where we're like, whoa, I'm not just the body. I'm also the mind. Something else is going on here. And then we stay there for a while. We're like, ooh, I'm the mind. I'm not just the body, I'm the mind. And then we come deeper into our breathing. We come deeper into our asana practice, and all of a sudden the mind gets still. And the awareness says, oh, I'm not just the body and I'm not just the mind. I'm actually observing the mind, observing the body. And that thing that is observing the mind, observing the body, that's Atman. That's Brahman, according to Vedanta philosophy. That is the all-prevailing consciousness. That is your true nature, according to Vedanta philosophy. And so, just like in practicing asana, we come to know that you're not the body. It's the same concept with neti, and it's a very long process, but you start simply with sitting with yourself and meditating on what you aren't. And it seems counterintuitive. It seems like, well, why are we dragging ourselves through the mud to come to the light? Because the mind is weird. It needs to be satiated. If you just sit there and, according to Shankaracharya, if we just sit there and meditate on, I am God, I am light, I have so much power, the mind is going to tweak that and then start using it in not the best way. And it's never going to actually be in your control. It's going to start changing, and the mind will never be still with that. It will always want more, because we are now in this place, on that path, still believing we are the mind, because we're using the mind. Does it?
I'm still confused.
Yeah, does it? It's going to come together. So what we do to come to understand these three statements of Advaita Vedanta is first we sit with what we aren't. First we sit and we meditate and we spend however much time it takes to really truly digest the fact that we are not the body. It's a gift. Atman made the body. It's made from Brahman. We created it in ourselves, but it's not what we are. It's not actually what we are. There's something else there. But first, we have to, according to Shankaracharya ji, do this process of elimination. And the very first step is meditating on, okay, before I was born, the body did not exist. And after I die, the body will cease to exist. The body is made from the food that I eat. And if I stop eating the food, the body will perish. It changes with time. It's subject to the elements. It's never not changing and moving. Therefore, it cannot be what truly is. Because what truly is, according to Vedanta, has no beginning, has no end, and never changes. So you do this first with the body. Okay? You meditate. Before I was born, I didn't have a body. After I die, I won't have a body. If I don't eat, I would lose my body. My body looks different than it did 5 years ago. It'll look different in another 5 years. It's constantly changing. It can't be what's real and forever. It can't be. And you meditate on that. And analytical, there's many different ways to meditate. An analytical meditation, again and again, I'm not that. And then something will click. Oh, I'm really not the body. I'm aware of that. And all the while, by the way, we're using the mind to do this. We're using the mind to do this. And then we go deeper into neti, and we come into the next phase, which will tell us that, okay, if I don't get enough sleep, my mind is foggy and not clear. If I oversleep, my mind is foggy and not clear. If I eat too much sugar, my mind is foggy and not clear. If I have too much caffeine, I get a headache. The mind is subject to external effects. If somebody tells me one thing, the mind gets angry. If somebody else tells me one thing, the mind swoons with romance. The mind is constantly changing. Before I had the body, the mind wasn't there. And after I lose the body, will the mind still be there? The mind can't be what is real because it has a beginning, it has an end, and it's subject to change. And we're actually using the mind to tear the mind apart at this point. And we go deeper. In every step in Neti Neti, once you move to this next step, the step before it becomes obsolete. Once you know that you're not the body, you don't have to spend time thinking about that you're not the body. You just already know it. So it's done. Once you're aware that you're not the mind, you don't have to use the mind to understand the mind. It's just done. You're done with it. It's very similar in how sometimes a very common thing that people want is to be patient. And they say, I'm going to teach myself how to be patient. I'm going to work with myself to be patient. I'm going to learn how to wait and be patient. And they make that agreement with themselves, most people. And then they say, well, I'm not just going to sit here. I'm going to find something to do. And then they look around, they see what's in front of them. Oh, I could do that while I'm waiting for this thing. While I'm waiting for this thing, I'm going to do the dishes. While I'm waiting for this thing to get done, while I'm waiting for this other job, I'm going to take this job. While I'm waiting for this thing to pan out, I'm going to focus on this project that's been given to me right now. And completely on accident, they become 100% present. They're not even waiting anymore. They're not even being patient anymore. They're doing what's directly in front of them, even though they backdoored their own brain. They thought that, oh, I'm waiting for this other thing. I'm just doing this for right now. And then they become so enveloped with it, oh, I'm late to that meeting that I was supposed to get to because I was just being completely present. And then when people, if you can come to the place where there's no judgment or criticism of that, and you say, oh, I actually rather enjoyed being in that flow state. I actually rather enjoyed that gnosis moment. I enjoyed being completely present. Being patient is obsolete. There's nothing that you have to wait for because there's always something directly in front of you that you do. It's the same thing when you start pulling the mind apart. Everything that we learned before, I don't need it anymore. It doesn't apply. I'm on to this next thing. I share that with you because if you ever come to a place where you start wanting to explore Vedanta philosophy or any philosophy for yourself, don't get attached. It would be wise to not get attached to the things that help you get there. Because once you're done with that tool, it has to go. Does that make sense? So this is important because a lot of times what happens here in the West and with what I think are possibly false teachers of Eastern philosophy is people get just so far into the process and then they stay there. They get, oh, I do so much Raja Yoga. I am very aware that I'm not the body. I know I'm not the body. And then they fall in love with being in the state of the mind. And then even love, emotion is only a thought. It's only a product of the mind. And then they stay there, and then the mind is also subject to change. And that is never going to be permanent. And so then they start losing that, and that causes suffering. Okay? So it's important to always be moving forward, just like in your asana practice. Eventually, seated forward bend gets boring, and you want to do something else. Eventually, you do shoulder stand for weeks and weeks on end, and you want to try a forearm stand. Once you get it, you probably don't do shoulder stand anymore. You probably just go forward. And it's the same when you're working with the mind. It's important to not get stuck with that space that you were at, but to continue to move forward. So, coming back to these core basic statements of Vedanta, how do we incorporate this into our life? Well, what does that mean? Most people, I feel like, that are alive on the planet today actually have some understanding of this. They're actually completely, on some level, aware of this. that there is no separation. According to Vedanta, that there is no separation. Most people are moderately have some sort of similar belief to that we're all connected, that we're all going through this existence together. So if we're all feeling this and knowing this and asking endless questions about this, what does this mean? Why are we all connected? Why did you text me when I was just thinking about you? Why did you bring me the food that I was just craving? Why did the radio play the song that was just in my head? All these things that happen to us all the time, and we start questioning. If we're all experiencing it, why then are we at this plateau? Why then are we unable to incorporate it into our life? Why then do we feel stuck? Well, for different people, it's different things. Maybe the biggest thing is having the attachment to the idea that we sort of understand. And saying, well, I know so much. I understand myself and spirituality this much. I'm at least aware that we're all connected on some level. I'm at least aware of that. And then when we start thinking that we know, we all of a sudden are closing doors to know more. We all of a sudden think we know enough, and then we're unopen to the idea. So I say this to say that even what I'm telling you might not even be true. That's all I'm saying. Even this supposed truth may not even be true. And by being unattached to knowing the truth, but just being into experimenting with the truth, you will come to have more truth. Instead of, I want to know everything, I want to understand it all. Because that's the mind. Being in a space where you're like, I would like to experience what's true, you will come to have much more truth than if you are hunting truth. Okay? So even this that I'm telling you might not be true. It is interesting, I will say this, studying Vedic philosophy, because right now, in current times, we're at this apex with our understanding of the scientific world, particularly with quantum physics. And it is outrageous, the parallels between the two. The biggest one, and I've used this example many times, is it was only 200 years ago that doctors started washing their hands. 6,000 years ago, surgeons in India, because surgery actually comes from a text in India, the Shishutra Samhita. Anyway, they would wash their hands. And they believed that disease was transmitted through contact with each other, even though they didn't have any way to quantify it, for instance, with a microscope. And then all of a sudden, 200 years ago, we had the microscope. And we said, oh, there's these little microorganisms, and they affect each other, and we can inoculate each other with them. All of a sudden, people started washing their hands. That was a huge one, because that was 6,000 years ago. People were already knowing that without quantifying it. And right now, the same thing is happening with these systems, for instance, Vedanta philosophy, and the scientific world, for instance, quantum physics, where all of a sudden you have this old world philosophy that's saying, hey, so within, so without. And then you have quantum physics saying, the further we observe the microcosm, the more we realize that it is mirroring the macrocosm. Everything that's happening on the microscopic level is happening on the macroscopic level. Humans react with each other the same way that bacteria react with each other. They have colonies, they have cliques, they isolate other ones, they battle each other, they have wars with each other, they make alliances with each other, they interbreed with each other. They're doing the same. They seem to be having some sort of consciousness. And this is on a microscopic level, and then you can see it on the macroscopic level. It's the same thing happening. Now, in the system of Vedanta, there are several things that are said about this. And I'm just using that as a for instance, because when we start studying these very old philosophies, while at the same time watching the modern world open its eyes to being able to quantify things, to prove things, to measure things, and seeing the parallels between the two, the mind goes crazy. It becomes very satisfied. It's no longer hungry. It feels we have developed the tool of the mind in such a way that it questions everything. And this is fantastic, because once upon a time, humans were not like this. They would just believe what was told to them. Some of them, okay, that's fine, I believe it. And some people still are like that, and that's also a very enjoyable life, I'm sure, actually. It's actually very enjoyable, probably. My point is, we have fine-tuned the mind to question everything and to want to understand everything and to be profoundly analytical. We have fine-tuned it to be this powerhouse of understanding. But at the same time, we didn't exactly build all the technology to be able to quantify everything to then feed the mind that we made this ferocious beast. And a lot of people will hit a wall with their understanding of the world and how things work in themselves. My recommendation is going backwards in time to these old philosophies just for fun and looking at them and seeing that some of the things that are being proposed 6,000 years ago might actually satiate the questions that we're having just now. I say this because this isn't some abstract philosophical system that doesn't apply to us in modern times. It 100% definitely does apply to us in modern times. It 100% could fuel this apex that we're at right now of self-understanding. And so it's fun to look at and study. But I encourage you to also experiment with it. You could read about it all day long, but until you incorporate it into your life, you're not going to know if it's truth or not. You could say, oh, well, I like going to Sivakami's class. She's really good at teaching asanas, so she told me to read this book, so it must be a great book. You read the first page and be like, this is baloney, until you experience it for yourself, until you decide. So it's the same with this. Incorporate it into your life and come to know what it is. And start questioning yourself. Use that mind as a tool. Okay, so consciousness is real. It's truth. I think most people have that feeling inside of them. This thing deeper that is witnessing the mind and the body, that feels true to me. That's truth. Okay. This world is an illusion. It's not real, but it feels very real. The thoughts that cause me to have emotions feel very real to me. How could it not be real? When I taste something, how is that not real? When I see something, how is that not real? When I feel something, how is that not real? If you start asking yourself these questions, it might take you to different places of the mind that you didn't know existed. And then the next one, okay, so this consciousness that I'm feeling and aware of all the time, and this understanding that everything else is not real, these two things are contradicting each other, and it's stressing me out. And there's no separation. This thing that I'm working so hard to understand is actually just me. This concept of this all-prevailing consciousness that is truth, and the concept that everything I see is actually false, that whole thing is all just inside of me. Start questioning yourself. Because next month, if I haven't lost you, next month we're going to talk about a different philosophical system. So I encourage you, just like since last month I had said, hey, see how you're incorporating the 4 paths of yoga into your life. See what you like and how you can change your sadhana, your daily practice, how you can adjust things. Several people that came to the class throughout the month talked to me about it and said, oh, I kind of noticed this and I noticed this and that I really liked doing this instead of this. And now I don't feel guilty about not doing this because I'm doing it my way. Great. That's fantastic. That was my entire goal with the class. And so now for this month, I encourage you guys to ask yourself these questions regarding these 3 statements. The all-prevailing consciousness is real. The world appears to be real, but actually it's an illusion, and there's no separation from you in that all-prevailing consciousness. You are the same. Now, this may or may not be true. Right now, at this moment, anybody in this room might say, that's 100% not true, or that's 100% makes sense to me, or I'm somewhere in the middle. Wherever you are on the spectrum, I'm just asking you to spend the month asking yourself those questions. So by next month, you either have come to a place where you, yes, absolutely, or no, absolutely, or now I have 50,000 other questions so that I can get to yes or no, absolutely.
So why do we want to know?
The reason we want to know is the reason that the same question that humans have been asking since the beginning of time. Why are we here? What is the point? Life is super scary. It's stressful. No matter how much yoga you do or what a great place you're in, you're still having anxiety. That's the human experience. So why, if we are this all-prevailing consciousness and we created this whole simulation, why would we choose to come here? According to Vedanta, once we come to know ourselves, we will begin to understand why we were born into this life, what your dharma is, what you came here to do. The fear starts to dissipate. You start to understand why that higher self chose this whole timeline for you and what the whole purpose was. Because when we're in it from this view, it just seems like a shit show. It seems crazy. Why would I choose this for myself? Why would my neighbor choose that for themselves? How is this serving the macrocosm? How is this propelling the entire planet evolutionarily? What is the point?
No chaos dice.
Yeah.
World, right?
Maybe that might be true too. It might all just be that. But if the mind does start to awaken, and we do start to have these questions, and oftentimes, this is what I'll say. Oftentimes, those really hard questions come in times of tragedy. Something horrible happens, like all the time. Something horrible happens, and then the mind starts experiencing very intense, overwhelming emotions. The mind does, not the true self. The mind experiences this, but it feels very real to us in the moment because the mind is strong, because we've made it strong. And in those moments, we start, well, what's the point of life? Why am I doing this? And now all I'm going to be doing is worried about this happening again, or how do I fix this, or why? And we start spiraling. So right now, before the storm hits, we build a house. We're not going to wait till it starts raining to build the house. We're going to build it right now. So we're going to, if we're the sadhak, the spiritual seeker, the one who's seeking to know himself, we start building that foundation even when the waters are calm. So before tragedy hits, we start to know ourselves and the whole point of being here. We start to deeply question, why did I choose this life? Why am I on this path? What am I meant to do before I die? What's the whole point of all of it? What's the whole point of his path? What's the point of her path? Where are we? Why do we know each other? Why is it interwoven? So we start getting to that direction when things are calm, so that when inevitably tragedy strikes, we still have that fundamental knowing inside of us. Otherwise, we will want to check out. We will. It's natural. And some people do. Actually, this past couple months, several people close to me committed suicide. It's a different conversation. And we'll never know. But we'll want to check out if we don't have our own foundation. Our own foundation. And for some people, their foundation is other people's foundations. And that works for them, and that's fine. But if you are in such a way where you really need your own fundamental truth and your own true understanding of what existence is about, then this is a good path for you, maybe, to explore different philosophies, explore what different people think the purpose of life is. And in that way, you do a process of elimination. You do, no, that's not true. No, that's not true. No, that's not true. No, that's not true. And then somehow you find your way to your own relative truth. And then when tragedy comes, you say, well, this is still who I am. This is still the whole point for me. So I'm good. The mind is angry. The heart is broken. Life is chaos. But I, the all-prevailing consciousness, I am unchanged. I am good. That's why I would say that what is the point? Because eventually, even if things are fine right now, there's no way to prove this, but I would say that every person that comes into existence at some point, even the greatest spiritual leaders in the world, at some point, what is the point? Jesus even, at one point. Why is this happening? Why have you done this to me? What is the point? Completely forgot who he was and what he was here to do. Buddha, there's a story about Krishna too, where he forgets who he is and he almost dies, and his brother starts yelling at him, Krishna, remember who you are, remember who you are, remember who you are, remember who you are. And right at the edge of death, he remembers who he is, and he fights back, and he prevails. That's just like us. We have to remember who we are, or we will perish. Life will be torturous. Yeah. Like I said, that is actually probably a nice life. In Ayurvedic medicine, there's this concept that that ignorance is bliss. There are people who live very extremely healthy lives, who are profoundly, and I don't use ignorant as a derogatory term, but are profoundly ignorant. And because of that, their bodies are very healthy. Their bodies are very healthy. So they don't worry about anything because they don't think that it matters. And they live great lives, and that's good for them. And they'll probably do that for thousands and thousands of lives, and that's good for them. But if you come to a place where you really want to have something of who you are and what's the point is and what you're meant to do here, coming to understand what you are not will help you to find out what you are. It is much easier, according to Shankaracharya, to do this process of elimination. Find out what you aren't, and all that will be left is what you are. It takes longer. But the mind gets satiated. It doesn't start questioning afterwards. It knows. And then when the mind is quiet, well, I don't know. It's never happened to me.
Still talking to you, right?
Yeah. So, I know that spiraled a little bit.
That I interrupted with the question.
No. That's fine. That's very good. Any other questions?
No, hold my tongue. I had enough
No, that
questions.
was
Three's my limit.
That actually really, really helped me. So,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah. I never know where these things are going to go. Depends on whatever comes through. But that's a taste of Vedanta philosophy, this concept that there's no separation, and there's only one thing that's real and everything else is an illusion. Everything else stems off from that. And it covers like literally everything, like every question you can have in life. There's endless books on it. It goes on and on and on. But you don't have to, I'm sharing with you, you can just sit with yourself and really start just through your day questioning, what are you really? What are you really? That's all.
Thinking of that quote from somebody, you're a mote in God's eye, but then you'd be part of God. So they could take it from there, and actually you need to sit back with some wine and be yakking all night about this stuff,
Mm-hmm.
But there's so many different ways it can go.
Mm-hmm. Because the mind loves to do that.
The different religions, too, from this one spreading to the different aspects from, Taoism,
Mm-hmm.
Shintoism, and all the other ones,
What I love about this philosophy is that if it's everything's an illusion, then it's actually a choice to suffer.
Mm-hmm.
God, why did I get married?
This is especially true in regards. Yeah. That's what you chose. Karma there.
We are one.
This is especially true in regards to illness in Vedic philosophy, which when we talk about Sankhya philosophy, which most of Ayurveda is built upon, we'll talk about that, the concept of why does the body get sick? Why does the mind get sick? Why do we become injured? There's a crazy Indian philosophical system about it that supposedly explains it all. And we're going to talk about it probably next month. Yeah. And it's interesting because this, even though these three statements of Vedanta seem really like crazy and like radical, like this is real, God is real, the universe is fake, you're actually God, even though these seem like really fundamental, like crazy radical statements, actually most religions you can break down, and there's this. Even in the Abrahamic religions, I have not studied Islam as deeply as I've studied Christianity, but even in Christianity, there's this concept of Christ consciousness, the all-prevailing consciousness. Even in the Christian Bible, in John 10:34, is Jesus is quoted to have said, "Is it not written in your law that ye are all gods?" There are some discrepancies that they say he's talking about. You guys are all judges. You all are judging me, but actually, the actual, if you don't translate it and you read it in Hebrew, the word that he uses is Elohim, which means divine God, not judges. And different spiritual teachers all over the world, which most of our religions stem from, talk about this Christ consciousness, this all-prevailing consciousness. You are God, wake up. And then we have cool movies like The Matrix.
I was just thinking about
Like,
that.
we have crazy people like Elon Musk trying to tell us we're living in a simulation. The theme is everywhere. So why humans all over the world through so many different thousands of years far apart from each other in time and space are all kind of coming back to the same question and the same concept. Maybe that's how we quantify that it's truth. I don't know. Anyway, any other questions? No. Appreciate you guys bearing with me the past 5 days. I had like a crazy past 5 days, and so I didn't get enough rest. And some of you guys know I have narcolepsy, and so I was having a lot of aphasia today. I was having a lot of trouble working with my words today, so I was trying to speak slowly. Speak slowly. Okay.
Yeah, because you use big words.
I was trying not to. I was trying to use regular people words because that's what Jesus did, and he helped a lot of people. You know, he made it simple, easy to digest. That's what Buddha did. He made it simple, easy to digest. Thanks for everybody who came to practice asana. That's super nice doing asana before, I think. It makes it in such a way that even the people who couldn't come to do asana, it kind of sets a good aroma of space for everybody. And so that's super nice. So I appreciate that. And please question yourself incessantly this next month until the mind is exhausted. It's also, I'm so sorry, I know we're going over. It's also a really good time to do this, okay, because on Saturday we had the equinox, and then just yesterday we had the harvest full moon, and we are just now beginning the new cycle, and it's going to continue all the way until All Saints Days. That's this 40-day cycle, and it's like the beginning of the year in this tradition, and this is the new cycle. This is the perfect time to start asking weird questions, because you're planting seeds for the whole next year. This is actually a great time to start questioning yourself in really big ways. The season is going to help you.
Right, now my brain's going to go into overload.
No, it's going to be good.
Thank you.
And then you'll have to come to asana class because you'll be desperate for your brain to be quiet for an hour. So, I have bananas for you guys. Thank you for...